Hi, everybody. I'm Kylie Eckren, Field Marketing Manager, and today I am joined with Katie Violet, and we are JailTalk. As you can see today, we are missing Rob McAfee. That is because it is International Women's Day, and we are kicking him to the curb for one episode. So today we are with Katie Violet. She currently works at Cass County, North Dakota. So, Katie, can you tell us a little bit about your history in law enforcement and what led you to getting into this industry?
Yep, sure, Kylie. Thanks for having me. My father was a trooper for 28 years in the state of North Dakota. He didn't want me to have anything to do with law enforcement, and just like any child, we totally listened to our parents. I went to the University of North Dakota, and I was undecided for 2 years, and I'm like, oh, shoot, my generals are about done. I better pick a major. And so then I went into speech pathology for 1 semester, and I was like, oof, this is not the field that I think that I am meant to be in. So I talked to one of my professors. I happened to work at a gym, and he worked out at that gym, and we would speak often, and I had him for a lot of electives, my general courses, and I was like, Frank, anybody that's ever been to the University of North Dakota, you know who Frank White is, the ridiculous waiting list to get into his courses. He was an amazing instructor. So I said, Frank, I don't know what to do with my life. Like, seriously, I'm halfway through my junior year. This is not it. And he's like, Katie, you would make an awesome cop. And I started laughing. And I'm like, no. I don't think that I would. I was not an innocent child, if you will. Thankfully, there was no social media back in my day. So I was able to get to the position that I am. I don't know that I would have otherwise. But I started thinking about it. I'd taken a lot of sociology courses, psychology courses. They were really interesting to me. So I said, well, what the heck? And then I called up my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I said, I changed my major today. He's like, oh, really? To what? And I said, criminal justice. He's like, no, you didn't. I said, oh, I did. He's like, no, you didn't. He's like, don't tell me that. You didn't. And I'm like, but I did. And however many years later, I'm not going to say, here I am.
Oh, well, I would guess nothing more than at least 5 years or so. So
3.5.
Yeah, we'll guess with that. So since you didn't say how many years you've been in the industry, but what have been some of the most rewarding and challenging parts over the years that you've experienced being in law enforcement, as a woman even? A lot, and I will say I've been around for 22 years. I was full-time for 12. I left for 4 years to raise my young children. I had three kids under the age of 5, took a different career path, did daycare in my home, harder than any job I've ever done in my life. I can't imagine.
But I missed the law enforcement. I kept my license up while I was gone. And then Cass County came out with part-time in 2018. And so then I went back. So for me, some of the challenges, my husband is also in law enforcement, and that's important because both being on shift work, is difficult, and figuring out that dynamic of wanting to have a family and knowing that we want to have a family. My career path, one of us had to get off of shift work. So that kind of influenced the path that I took. I initially started out in corrections. I was there for 5 years. It was a good fit for me, but I also, through that process, became a licensed peace officer. And as you all know from these previous jail talks, then Sheriff Paul Laney got elected to office. And as we all know, Paul can sell snow to Eskimos. So Paul and I were having a conversation in the jail one day, and we hadn't had a female on the field side. And we had a DARE officer, but other than that, and on the field side, it had been years and years since women had applied. There was just a stereotype. I don't want to say if it was true or not true, but women weren't applying for field spots. And Paul's like, hey, Katie, we got a patrol spot open. I think you should apply. And I'm like, no, thank you. He's like, no, I think you'd be really good. I've known you, he worked for Fargo PD before that. And he's like, I've known you for years. I just think, you'd be really good at it. And I'm like, no, thank you. But, and Paul and his wisdom and selling snow to Eskimos, he's like, well, what if I promised you the climate is going to change in this department? And I trusted Paul, and I still trust Paul. Mm-hmm. And so I took that leap and went out into the field side, which has been awesome because we have had so many women now that aren't afraid to apply for those positions, and they're out doing those jobs. And we always knew that they were out there. It was just getting somebody to take the plunge.
Mm-hmm. Well, good for you to be one of the first women to get out there and do that. Has there been any like challenges that you've experienced over the years too then?
Just as a woman, or just in general?
Just in general in law enforcement, or as a woman, like I guess anything that comes to mind over your 22 years of service.
I mean, I could say as a woman, it's just finding that family life balance, pregnancy. What do we do? You know, at the time there was kind of a standard of you're 20 weeks into your pregnancy, now you're on light duty. I would have worked longer, but I was told at that time, you're done. Like, we got to find somewhere for you to go. Now that has changed. The woman has the ability to decide when she can be pulled from the field. So, I mean, that was a challenge. It was something that we just hadn't dealt with. You know, it's one thing in corrections when you can work, you know, in a control room or as a booking clerk, something along those lines. But on the field side, it's a delicate balance because you have to keep yourself safe, but you also don't want to let your team down because then they're working short or they've got to move other people around to fill your spot. And then the maternity leave and all those things. But my department's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic in that. So, I mean, that was a challenge. My husband, again, working in law enforcement was a challenge with the two of us having those schedules. Though the job, I was never disrespected as a woman.
Good.
So that's what was really important to me. And, where are we going? What's next?
Well, as it being International Women's Day, and I know that you are a mother of 2 young girls, and I know you have a wonderful son as well, but for any young girls coming up in this world and considering law enforcement as a career, what advice would you give to those young girls?
You can do it. I mean, you know, you can do it. Maybe you don't have the physical strength of some of your counterparts, but you've got a voice. And I think that's kind of our number one defense initially in a situation, you know, is your ability to talk to people. I think working in the jail helps that on the field side. Starting in the jail was huge for me. I mean, if you can handle that, you can handle anything. Now, do I want my girls to get into law enforcement? I'm not going to share that opinion on this show, Kylie. But
well, you are your father's daughter.
Yes,
so.
Yes, right. My kids totally listen to me. But no, I think it's great. I think it's important for internships, you know, to test the waters early because some people get into it too in just a couple months and decide, you know, that it's not for them. But absolutely, there are so many opportunities. And yes, there are still more men in law enforcement than women, but that's coming around. And again, I just think there's a mutual respect between men and women in law enforcement. So it's not an issue.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And thank you so much for being on today. We'll kind of keep this episode short and sweet, but I am super grateful that you were able to take the time today to come and visit us and be on the show. I'm going to give you the opportunity to shout out anybody that you want to, if you want to.
As in women in the field or just anybody in general?
Anybody you want.
Well, just a shout out to my department. You are all amazing people, and I'm thankful and grateful to have the opportunity to work with all of you. And of course, all of my customers. I mean, that's huge. Too many to list. I think I've got 31 counties that I work with here from the turnkey side of my job. So shout out to all of you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on today. For our viewers, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify at JailTalk Podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube and Instagram or at turnkeycorrections.com. Next time we will see you next time with Rob McAfee back. We will see you guys next time.